Our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by our friends at Zapper, the world's leading augmented reality platform and creative studio, with over 11 years of experience working with the world's biggest brands through Zapper Creative Studio. Zapper also has an award-winning web AR platform, ZapWorks, that lets you create your own mobile AR magic. Finally, check out their Zap Box, the most affordable mixed reality headset on the planet. Start creating AR over at zap.works or talk to them about your next AR project at zapper.com. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink with Ted Schilowitz and Rony Abovitz for This Week in XR. It's February 10th, 2023. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, guys. Bagel in hand and ready for podcasting.
Our guest today is Jon Karafin, whose company, LightField Lab, just raised another $50 million. They've got an all-star list of investors for this new technology they call that makes something called a solid light hologram. And it actually is something made out of light. It emanates from flat panels. They're looking at the display market. Jon is a great guy. He's one of the former Litro guys, Ted. So yeah. you and Jon must know each other.
Oh, yeah, we know each other well. It's actually really interesting because...
So I actually was in San Jose 2 weeks ago. So I went and saw this thing. In fact, I think I mentioned it to you, Ted. I mean, it really makes an impression on you because it's a thing that appears to be solid and you stick your hand through it and it's made of light.
Yeah, I would say this is the one potentially relevant technology that I have still yet to get my eyes on. And I was actually at Jon's office a couple of years ago, and they just weren't quite ready to demo it. So I'm still in the dark about it. And we were talking offline. I still have this curiosity. Is it, and you've seen it, I haven't, is it fundamentally better than what's going on now with 8K displays converging a 3D non-glasses image? That's my very big curiosity.
I've only seen the small scale demos. I want to see what it really looks like on the side of a building, and does it do Blade Runner, right? That's sort of, to me, where when they say it's the display market, yeah, they're going to do a building in Times Square and the giant sneaker or whatever is going to rotate over, the intersection of, 43rd Street and Broadway.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about just entertainment and visuals as a general theme and thesis is that effect can be done and is actually done today. And Rony, you might know a little bit about this, by effectively just using a false frame around the LED so that your eye gets tricked into thinking that the object in the frame is actually three-dimensional, and it is shockingly, surprisingly good. Like
Looking Glass does this.
No. This is not looking. This is not that. This is literally a 2D image with a visual trick where they basically take the edge of the LED panel, set a frame around it, an artificial frame, and then create the illusion of 3D depth. And it is like, next time you go down to LA Live, Charlie, in Los Angeles, you'll see some Nike ads and things where they do this trick and a couple of makeup and perfume ads. And you look at it and go, wow, is that actually a 3D billboard? And it's not, it's just your brain. It's fascinating to see how well it works. I don't know if you've seen it, Rony, but it is fascinating.
I've seen it. There's a lot of it's super cool. I guess, Charlie, this will be a very interesting show because I know way too much about this topic. One of the founders of Zebra, which was the leading hologram and digital hologram company in the United States when I was starting Magic Leap, joined early as Magic Leap as one of our chief scientists. So I just have and they were building something like what LightField Labs is doing. Actually spent a lot of time with the guys at Litro early on. But one of the questions I'm going to have for him, which may be super nerdy for this audience, but is it actually a hologram? One of my pet peeves is the misuse of the word hologram.
A widely abused word.
Yeah, because it's okay. There's all these different visual phenomena. And I think of hologram as a very specific kind of thing that people who've been studying holography for almost 100 years are probably also super into. And we can ask them that.
The illusion of volume versus actual pixel volume, right? It's a very interesting distinction.
It's more of it's a physics and math definition of how the wavefronts of light are captured onto a particular substrate. Right. And is that actually what's happening? If you go back to the old classic holograms on holographic film, and they've gone from like monochromatic to color, and Zebra did these very amazing full color static holograms. Are they doing the digital version of that, or is it an auto stereoscopic trick on a display, which is something else?
Did either of you ever go to the hologram museum in Soho back in the day? There was on Mercer Street, there was a holographic, true photographic hologram museum. And I went a bunch of times and I lived in New York, and it was remarkable. They had yellow, sort of amber ones, they had green ones, and they had red ones, because they were all coherent light photographs, but they are truly an actual representation of the object.
I would encourage you guys to take a look at the videos that are on my column this week of what LightField Labs has done. And again, they're small scale compared to what they're planning to do. And their target market is, as I said, giant billboards, museums, and the holograms appear to be solid. They don't appear, they look like an animatronic.
Clearly, we're all
well-lit animatronic, but when you stick your hand through it, it is not there.
Right.
Charlie, one quick question. Have you ever done the floating penny, which is a classic LightField, where there's a penny and kind of like a curved mirrored thing, and then there's a solid, perfect LightField reproduction of the penny. You put your finger through, and you swear it's there.
And it's not there until it's there.
Yes, I have seen that.
Like that.
And this is not that. This is not that. I mean,
no, is it like that? And it's perfect. Like that little trick is a perfect LightField of a real penny.
Yes, yes. You stick your hand through it, and it's like it's not there. But when your hand pulls back, it's still there. So anyway, we'll get to that with John. We have a few.
Yeah, we cannot wait to see it.
Some news that we used to consider big news, such as Realwear, which is an industrial HMD. It's a monocular micro display that just sort of hangs off of a hard hat. It's not, it's assisted, not augmented reality. They're going public via a merger with a SPAC. The SPAC's got 185 million in cash, and Realwear sells, makes about $20 million a year. So really interesting, large deal. I mean, sort of enterprise has never gone away, but that's where we're seeing its scale expressed.
Yeah, yet another tick mark in our long-standing philosophy, Charlie, that industrial and productivity use cases are the first profit veins of this type of stuff.
I thought my red flag handout though, like, is this the time in the market? I do wish them the best. Is this the time in the market though to A, go public, and B, do it through a SPAC? Because I think SPACs have had some real issues over the last couple of years, and they were the new thing. And then there's been a whole mixed bag around them. But like, is this that moment of sentiment for investors to want to?
It does seem rather 2021.
At the end of the day, if they can pull it off, it's the right move, and if they can't, it's the wrong move. It's really what it comes down to.
Oh, we wish them the best. We wish them the best.
Absolutely.
There was a bunch of other financing news, actually. Mawari, remember the AR cloud? Which was a sort of appless world where your XR device, even if it's a phone, but any XR device with a browser is sort of always on, always connected. Like we don't need apps to run on the internet. So that was the idea behind the AR cloud. But it turns out that's really almost impossible to do, because you need a codec for compressing and decompressing the video. And you need a local node, just like Akamai provides for companies like Netflix, to throttle and manage the bandwidth so that there's no latency. And so there's a little company that has done this, Mawari. They were mostly bootstrapping and doing proof of concept with, telcos like KDDI and T-Mobile. And so they raised a bunch of money for, it's a blockchain-based network. So the telcos provide the nodes and the bandwidth. Mawari provides its technology. You might have some localization technology involved with this sort of a stack. And the people in the stack get a royalty based on usage that is paid by the user, let's say Snapchat. Right. So, and so that would all be, the royalties would be distributed via blockchain, probably tokenized, right? So you have a marketplace, people are buying the AR cloud or access to
Kelly,
the
I
AR
just say
cloud.
something about that.
Yeah.
If we took a certain number of keywords that were relevant in tech, I think a string of those together is
put them into ChatGPT and see what comes out the other side.
Investors are effectively funding every string of that, like AR cloud times this times that. That's a company. Let's fund it. And I think what people are doing, just flinging money at those keyword strings, hoping that one or two of them hit, and they hit at 100. I mean, it's just
but in their defense, I have seen this. I've demoed what they're doing. It does work at the beginnings of their journey, and this is like, I think what you're referring to, Rony, is investing in a conceptual idea that makes complete sense to everybody that would look at it. Of course, it makes sense to de-weight the device and run just like we do the internet today. Right?
Hugo Swart from Qualcomm, who's going to be our guest in 2 weeks, has been talking about dual compute for years.
Yeah.
And because he knows that they can't put enough horsepower in a device, they can't provide enough even electricity to do what it needs to do. It has to, they have to take some of this processing.
Look, here's the metaphor, right? If you take everything that you do on your smartphone and had it all on-prem, your smartphone would weigh 7,000 pounds. Right?
Wait a second, though. This is the net appliance idea, which is like a 10, 15, 20-year-old idea versus, look, I would argue that the iPhone has an amazing chip on it, and it does a whole bunch of local processing and some cloud-based processing. And I just think the world is going to keep going that way.
Absolutely.
Anyway, congrats to Mawari. We need to get to John. Looks like Accenture's making an investment in Looking Glass. We're having the guys from Sandbox location-based VR just got the Squid Game.
Yeah, and they do a lot of Star Trek stuff with us. So they do some LBE stuff with us on Paramount.
Yeah, he's going to be on the show also.
Good. Yeah, that'll be fun.
We'll. I mean, again, math. I mean, how do they really pull it? That'll be more magic than the VR is. How is that a business? But we will see. I mean, they're, LB VR or location-based entertainment is certainly not going away. The VR part, we shall see. So, the one other thing I wanted to bring up, well, actually, Rony had a really big topic, but I think we're going to have to save that, which was that we started in the green room, one of those conversations where you have to stop yourself because you're going to burn up the entire conversation before you're recording. But Rony said he had a sense, going over the news with us, being a voracious news hound himself, talking to people all day long, that XR, and there were more layoffs at Microsoft this week while they were taking a victory lap with AI. XR was taking another one to the face at Microsoft. So Rony said, I feel like, well, you can say it in your own words, Rony. XR.
It's a big exhale, right? And I think there's the new cool.
There's a Wired cover for you.
The big exhale and the new cool kid is like the newest form of AI and ChatGPT. And a lot of companies are like, if you're on the XR team, you're getting fired, you're getting marginalized. But I think it's a mistake because we're in the middle period of XR. And some of the players who are not going to give up are actually going to get to the finish line and win in a disproportionate way. And then you'll kind of like pivot again and go, oh my God, it's cool again, right? It's like you couldn't give up on mobile before the iPhone because you just had to keep making progress until the definitive device arrived. And I think you have to have the endurance and staying power to go there, right? And like who were the winners of mobile? It was Apple at the end. And all the people that were the early and mid players like just did not have the full strength to keep going. And they gave up and they lost the giant big prize at the end.
So
there's a lesson to be learned here, right? Look at Motorola, look at Nokia, look at Ericsson, look at everyone who came before. They stayed the course. It wouldn't have been Apple, but they gave the whole thing away to Apple, who had the long-term patience to win.
So Charlie, did you end up going to that Google event in Playa Vista?
I did not.
Okay, so I gave a little talk there on video because I was double booked, had 2 talks to do. And I waxed philosophically on this topic. And I'm very curious, Rony, to see if you agree with this. My my sort of point of view on this trajectory is that all of these companies effectively threw too much resources, too much capital, too much everything at the problem, so that they're trying to artificially create the market faster than the market is ready to be created. And therefore, do they learn from this? And, I'm at a Google conference and I'm saying, by the way, Google did this too. And, self-admittingly, you and I are very close friends. I think Magic Leap did it a little bit too. Everybody went too big, too fast, and tried to build something.
Well, Clay
to
Bavor
satisfy their
just
investors.
left. Clay Bavor announced that he was leaving Google this week to do an AI startup of all things.
I just think smaller.
Here's one of the top XR guys going AI.
I just think smaller is better until the trajectory moment. And to the point about Apple, Apple learns to wait. They understand how to watch everybody else burn all the resources, learn from it, spend a lot less than people think, and then ramp up at the right time. And that's the lesson that I don't think gets learned by these big tech companies over and over and over again, especially the immature ones like Meta. They just don't understand it. That's just my philosophy on it. So whether it's valid or not, I don't know, but that's my philosophy.
Let's do a part 2 longer on the next show.
Okay.
I think you're 70% right, but I think there's another part of it that's worth getting into.
Okay. Well, John's here, so
we're bringing Jon in from the
table it for next week.
I hope he's done his hair.
There he is.
Jon,
I have indeed.
Good to see you. We've been singing about holograms all morning. Thanks for coming to the show.
What's the sound of the music sound like for singing a hologram?
Well, I think, first of all, I saw this with my own eyes. And as I've said in the story that I wrote, and as I've said to you many times, every time you see it, it makes a big impression on you because it's something you've never seen before, which is something that appears to be real. Right. In this case, you did a demo of like a floating head. It appears to be like an animatronic or some kind of Pepper's ghost trick, but you stick your hand through it and there's nothing there. And you pull your hand back and there is the, seemingly real object again. So, it's not like anything. But I think the question we all had is, of course, hologram is a word that's been widely abused. So tell us why the solid light hologram is a real hologram, but all of these other guys making holograms are really just playing tricks on the eye.
Well, I appreciate the differentiation. I feel like I have to go through some HR training for the abuse of the word hologram. The thing, but first of all, there's a lot of other technologies out there, and just to be clear, they are great technologies. There's nothing that inherently makes them less good. It's just the fact that they're not actually producing something that is interfering in midair to allow you to create the exact reflectance that would have originated had the object been there natively. So that is the major difference of what we're doing versus other things that talk about or market themselves as holographic, is the fact that we want to make sure that you have a social, ubiquitous experience where everyone is able to see this object floating in midair as if it was the real thing.
So John, quick question.
Yeah. Good to see you again, by the way.
Good to see you. I know just way too much about this topic. And just for
yes, you do.
I had the co-founder of Zebra as one of my employees for a while.
Yeah, Michael, right?
Yeah. So your claim, and I would be amazing that it's true, is that you are not doing multi-view, you're not doing auto stereoscopic, you're doing a honest to goodness, physics true, MIT hologram lab kind of hologram. Not the way they did on static, but in a digital format, the real deal.
Yes, that's correct. Now, it's very different than what MIT was doing for very explicit reasons. We are a white light hologram. We are explicitly non-coherent. And that is a very important point that we always highlight. And it makes it much more challenging when you're dealing with broad spectrum. But we do control and modulate the amplitude. We also control the phase in order to form our focal spots, and that creates your reflectance.
Okay, no, that's awesome, because you are doing something different than sort of the coherent light, but immediately you're starting to answer the question, like, we're not just doing we're really looking at the physics of holography and bringing that in a digital panel format in a real way.
That's correct. And I don't know if you actually can see behind me the big stack of papers that I think, Charlie, you called it, looked like we're going into the publishing business. It's just the published patent portfolio for the tech. And I highlight it because this is a very challenging deep tech. It goes into the molecular structures of these nanoparticles and a whole bunch of other things that I won't bore the audience with. But this is something that is extremely challenging to do, which is why we are building our team, we're scaling our team, we're building out manufacturing, and there's a lot more ahead of us. But hopefully, as Charlie was able to see in person, and the two of you have a standing invite, of course, I hope you were able to see that this is the beginning of something completely differentiated and a very unique experience where start thinking of objects, don't think of images. And Charlie, when you were here, I hope that was a reoccurring theme you heard, that you no longer think of, do I render a 2D image or do I photograph a 2D image? It's now we have to create and compute the wavefront for every aspect of what is being formed. And that's not like any other renderer or render engine. That's something very different.
So the last time I saw Jon, this is a sort of comical, sort of almost Silicon Valley entourage level story. Excuse me. I went up to the lab in San Jose and our flight was delayed, and he had another like investor sort of meeting going on at the same time. And they literally couldn't show it to us. So it was there on site. He's like, we had everything organized and it was all very kind of cloak and dagger. And it was kind of fantastically awesome. So I was talking before the podcast that, because I look at a lot of new technologies, just like Charlie and Rony do. This is the one thing I have still not seen with my own eyes. And I've been at presentations with you and talks with you, and I've still not yet to see it. But we had a really interesting discussion earlier, and I'm actually very curious if you or any of your staff either remember or have, more importantly, been to, when it was in existence, the Hologram Museum in New York City, which was a small little museum in Soho on Mercer Street. And we were talking about coherent light. What actually makes a hologram is the ability to take light at a certain frequency and a certain dynamic, so it's coherent. It is not a light spread like white light. And you can actually make a duplicate of the depth. But so far, to my knowledge, you can only do it with one spectrum of light. So when you see holograms, you'll see them in green or amber or red. You will not see them as RGB. So would you say that the big advancement that you're doing, in addition to actually making it move, so you're doing it at X amount of frames per second, is you've figured out a way to create a substrate that can do what a classic true hologram does, which is a true digital coherent light representation of the actual image. And you're now doing that in a visual way. Because my curiosity is, will this be better than what we can do now with super high res display, 8K or 16K, so we can do 4K on each eye, so fidelity is really good, and we converge the image, and we can pull an image out in 3D and at pretty large size now, because these screens are not a fortune, and create that illusion of really good three-dimensional depth. Is there a fundamental difference for the viewer? I mean, I understand technically it's different, but from a viewer perspective, is it going to be that remarkable? That's the two-sided question to that.
That is a extremely loaded question, and I think you are one in the entire planet that could ask such an eloquent question there. So the first thing about the museum, yes, awesome museum, love it. The next point about the color in a hologram, that has been done before with pulsed laser holograms. There's a lot of things that are out there that have done RGB. Some are doing 6 colors, some are doing 7 color, but they're all on high res photopolymers or some piece of film, which means static. And those things can be absolutely gorgeous. I mean, some of the most beautiful, highest resolution, you're talking about grain structures down to single digit nanometers, which I geek out on that stuff all day. I love it. So in terms of the last part of your question, the experience for the viewer, The major innovation we have is the ability to bypass and get around the fundamental display and fabrication and physics limits that have been traditionally imposed upon display surfaces. So in our panels, right now, we're building them as these modular video walls effectively. Each one of them has 2.5 billion pixels that are now the samples for the wavefront. And then as you continue to scale out that surface, it becomes a larger and larger optical medium. So by doing that, you're making a large format experience that is able to form the focal spot in midair. So when you're talking about the differentiation between that as an object now compared to stereopsis with a stereoscopic display, those displays, again, are great. The 2D displays that they're leveraging are great, right? You got these 8K displays that are very high res, very beautiful. And that is always our metric to compare against from a visual quality standpoint. Right. But there is a very distinct difference when you're looking at something either stereoscopic with passive eyewear or active eyewear, like a head-mounted display, versus seeing something that is actually presented to you as if it is the real thing. The easiest way to understand it is as if, well, our goal fundamentally is we want you to say that was a great actor, not, wow, that was a cool display that I was looking at. And that is what you'll start to see, particularly as we continue to scale.
Yeah, the other thing that I know has issues with the auto stereoscopic, no glasses 3D, is that it requires a camera or some sort of sensor to know where the viewer is looking. So as far as I know, it can really only do effectively one person at a time and maybe small groups of 2 or 3, because it has to know where your proximity is to the display to actually create the auto stereo without the glasses. And it is a remarkable effect when it works, when you're seeing it. But your device doesn't have that limitation.
Oh, no.
That's a big difference from my standpoint.
Yeah, and not only that, sorry, just to wrap on that point real quick. Because we don't require any head tracking, any eye tracking, any tracking whatsoever, unless our customers want to use it for other UI element type things. And that's, right. We provide that flexibility. When you're talking about using auto stereo and the head tracking, and there's a couple of companies that do that, and there's a couple of others, obviously all the head tracking things, even at that, you're still forcing the eye to use stereopsis and focus at a particular plane. And there's a misnomer out there that if you were to bake in depth of field to the left eye and to the right eye, that it's equivalent. And that is, in fact, not true, because the eye needs the ability to have retinal blur to focus anywhere in space. And that is everything that we're providing, is the ability to form the retinal blurs so that your eye can then track and focus anwehere that it wants.
Yeah, well, Rony was working on that. That is part of his background.
Absolutely.
The understanding of the eye tracking. Yeah.
Especially I feel like we've been climbing the same mountain from different roads. And I guess question for you, I love the physics and tech. I totally get what you're doing. With like people like Ted and myself, we're plugged into so many sectors and so many companies. Like, who are the first 3 that are going to use this, like sectors, and why this and not something else? Like, is it radiology, or is it healthcare? Is it defense? Like, why? And like dig into, they have access to an 8K display or 16 display or something. So why are they picking this? That would be kind of cool to hear you on that.
Sure. I feel like I'm talking to an investor now. Where is your launch market? And it really is the right question, because we wanted to make sure as a company, we're not trying to find a market for something that's just cool. We already have customers, we already have contracts, and the first uses that you will see this launched within is the premium entertainment markets. Within the premium segment of video walls, which is the fastest growing market in the display segment, you see corporate lobbies, you see casinos, you see anywhere that you have extremely high foot traffic and you're trying to differentiate and grab people's attention, because everybody's on their phones, they're on their laptops, they're on their other screens, and they need to advertise to them or show them something that is unique. And that's where we're getting customers that come to us and say, I can't get people's attention. I need to grab them. We need a physical object, something that is so differentiated that it will grab your attention. And there is a huge customer base for that. And that is really where the 2D video wall market, particularly in the what's called the the fine pixel pitch or the narrow pixel pitch market, that's where they're excelling as well, because that is a extremely premium, very high quality, beautiful display market. And if we can be competitive, which is where our launch price points are, we can take over that market, which is pretty exciting, we think.
Yeah, there's a humongous display. I'm actually on my way to Vegas for some dev work this weekend and next week. In the Circa Hotel, which is kind of near Fremont Street.
Yep.
This kind of new hotel that they built there. And it has this amazing display for the sports book that they mostly kind of misuse, right? Because they mostly break it up into a whole bunch of sporting events because it's a sports book. But every now and again, they'll fire up all the pixels at once and run this like gigantic sporting event on it. And you just sit there and you look at it, and it is remarkable because the pixel pitch is so fine. The thing must have cost a fortune.
Yep.
When I extrapolate to the future, if you and your technology can do what you're saying it can do at that kind of scale, that is Blade Runner. That is going to be a whole new world of how we visualize things in public spaces. It's going to be fascinating.
John, to add to Ted for a second, are we going to see, like inside a Disney, inside a sports arena, like a giant wall? Like you have these huge walls of 8K displays. You're going to be like at that scale, at let's say 4K and above resolution. Do you think you guys are going to get there?
Oh, certainly. Now, when you say 4K resolution, I mean, we're well beyond that from a underlying sample standpoint. Magnitudes beyond that already. So I think 10 billion pixels per square meter is what we're already doing. And that's a somewhat product-driven requirement. We could go much higher density than that, and we could go much larger than that. So when you start to see the larger format walls, you'll see tens of billions, hundreds of billions of samples or pixels that we're modulating in the larger formats. Now, with that said, that is the sampled wavefront modulation density, which is a big mouthful of words saying the output that is formed is a derivative of what is your target viewing distance, just like any other display. So, your cell phone is the same resolution as your movie screen, effectively. And it's a matter of where is your target given about a 30, 40 degree angle of view away. And that's usually what the...
So I know Charlie's chomping at the bit. I have another technical question.
No, keep going. Jump right in.
You actually have never tested the large screen that we're talking about, right? The 3-story tall projection of a football player. First of all, I mean, do you even know how far that would be projected into the air away from the projection surface? And when are you going to be able to test that? You must be chomping at the bit too, not just us.
Oh, you have no idea.
We
closed our Series B, and it's all about scaling manufacturing here. So not only have we not tested it, we need to build out the production line to go into the higher volume production to have multiples of these panels. But it is just like any other 2D video wall. You put them together, they're seamless, they're bezel-less, and that's what allows us to go to the larger and larger surfaces. So you'll start to see those, but we have all the confidence in the world that not only does it work, but we can showcase it, we can show you it is a linear scaling of the computation behind it as well. To answer that second part of your question about how far will it project, there's a lot of variables there, and it is very, I'm going to call it application specific, in that if a particular customer is expecting you to build a large wall that people are offset from a significant distance, then you can project further and leverage the wavefront in a larger volume. If you're looking for things that kind of a different application or use case where you want somebody to be able to reach and grab the hologram in a more close and more intimate viewing experience, your volumes will be a bit more conservative, but then it's because your density has to be that much more significant. So there's different trades that you make in terms of how you create the energy, how you form these wavefronts, how you form the cones of light, and it's all customizable for our customers.
It's a bit like a Wright brothers discussion. I think the three of us are very positive, diplomatic skeptics, right? Like we have so much technical knowledge of the space between the three of us. We understand your aspirations and your goals, but we were back at Kitty Hawk. We'd be the three guys that Yeah, maybe this will work. I don't know. I mean, can you really get a plane up in the air and let it, kind of thing?
Well, here's the question, John. One of the most famous digital NFT artists is a friend of mine for a long time. A guy named Beeple. He made this thing called Human One, which was his panel building of the illusion of a volumetric like astronaut walking. And at some point he'll probably listen to this. So tell Beeple, how far away is he from having a Human One like, Beeple on your device that you can walk into a studio or some installation and see something like a Human One at the scale it was presented through your system, but way cooler, right? It's not trapped in a cage. It's like right there in the lobby of MoMA or the Shed in New York or something. Like, how far away are we from that?
Well, it depends on when he's ready to buy one, right?
I mean, are we within 3 years of that? Like, are we going to walk into the MoMA and instead of like the brilliant artist guy named Rafiq has this amazing panel wall happening right now at the MoMA of like all this AI art, full scale, like a bunch of these 8K panels. When can you walk into the MoMA in that room and it's like just all floating around the room off of your stuff? Are we talking within 3 years at that sort of scale and resolution? Are we talking 10 years? Just order of magnitude.
So you're talking in the nearer term versus a longer term, but it's a matter of at what, where's your product market fit at what price point, right? So when you talk about the museum space, they are very heavily funded, but it depends on which application, which museum, blah, blah, blah. And I hate to go into the business side of it. Sure. So when we're talking about for Beeple, given that, what was his NFT for 69 million, right? He could be one of the first if he so elected.
Be an early adopter, right?
He could
like
be
the kind of people that would buy that. Wouldn't they love that kind of art on one of your things? And it's like just floating in the living room of someone who's worth $1 billion or something. Like that feels like a very early adoption place for what you're doing.
It could be definitely. So if, and I'm trying to hedge because I always imagine that future cut edit, and John, you said this way back then.
Very smart of you, by the way. Very, very smart.
Well, you say that except for the editing that we'll forget about the all my other lip service
Your
here.
caveat.
But the in that 3-year time frame, yes, you will have those types of experiences. But whether or not you are actively aware that it is a display is our entire goal. So whether or not you're aware that you're seeing the hologram or not, that's a secondary question. But in terms of the wider spread adoption, because this is a very deep tech, this is not your everyday go to Best Buy and pick up an 8K television. It will be that, but you're talking in the next generation of displays beyond where you see them today.
So are we headed toward the holodeck, right? Can you do a whole room where you do the floor, you do the walls, you do everything? And so in that room, you could make an entirely other immersive world that would appear to be real.
That is everything that we are living for right now.
Because, I know a guy who happens to work for that company that makes that IP. So wouldn't that be fantastic? Here's like, if I put my brain and my mouth in the voice of an investor, right? I would ask you, is part of the challenge with this the exponential expense? Because one of the things I know about display technology is as you build density, you get exponentially higher costs. So when you go into an Apple store and see their amazing, fairly dense display that covers the whole wall, that's an extraordinarily expensive display. And there's value to it in the cachet of Apple having that. But if you stand 10 feet further back from it, you could put a display, to your point about the iPhone versus the movie screen, that would effectively, even with 20/20 vision, look the same to that viewer from 10 feet further back. So there's always a right density for the right application and the right size, right?
Correct.
Do you believe when you talk to your investors, kind of similar to Rony's question, is the trajectory so many years in the future to bring the costs down to the logical, like even for massive display tech, like, you go to Times Square and that big fairly high density display in on the front of the Marriott marquee is actually not that high density because you're never standing that close to it, right? It just looks high density. But if they made it too high density, it would literally be cost ineffective. It would be so expensive, even with today's technology, that you could never even deploy it. It would just be ridiculous, the cost of it, hundreds of millions of dollars. So the question is, if I'm an investor and I want to, help you continue your journey, am I going to be alive to see this actually come into a commercial realm or not? Right? I mean, do you feel, this is one of those questions, of course, if we chop this up, another one, you get you in trouble, but do you really feel that it's viable, that you can make these things cheap enough eventually? And is that, to Rony's point, is that 10 years out, 20 years out?
I mean, that's a very tough question to a founder who obviously has to believe in it. Otherwise, why would he be doing it?
But from an investor's perspective, I want to hear his validity on, no, I believe it, and this is why, right?
Yeah. I have like a brotherhood with Rony because he's gone through all of this as well. So absolutely, and I'll tell you why. It's because when you're talking about the cost of some display that is such a dramatic deviation from the standards that are out there, the exponential costs are because you have to go through the fabrication process and you have all the tooling, you have everything else that is now an abnormal thing to do. We're able to actually leverage the existing commodity pixel structures that are out there and literally fuse silicon together. And in doing so, now I have a linear cost structure versus an exponential cost structure.
Right, that's interesting, yeah.
Right, and that is part of these nanoparticles and these polymers. Well, I can go into all the chemistry and geek out forever and how much time? Okay, I won't do that, I promise. But it is a linear cost. We're actually, when you look at it on a cost per pixel basis, and I hate to dive too deep into business stuff here, we are dramatically less expensive than the equivalent if you were to try and just do it with a whole bunch of tiled 4K displays. And that's where, yeah, absolutely. This is not a 100-year, 5,000-year vision. This is something that you're able to do in a time frame that is out competing that 7-year 4x in resolution cycle. We're actually already higher than anything that any manufacturer could produce in the next 100 years.
Charlie, before we kind of wrap up, I just want to give John a no response required unsolicited piece of advice from a founder to a founder.
Free consulting, go for it.
I love it. Basically, where you are, my gut, if you've done what I think you've done, there are Sony, Apple, Samsung, a couple others. If you've actually done what you've done, you're in the zone where it's probably the right moment to be inside one of those companies. The journey past this point, which I took, is exponentially more insanely difficult. And the capital raising is exponentially more difficult than anything you've encountered to date. So if you really have what you have, those are the kind of companies who have all the scale and everything to take what you've done and bring it to the world much faster than you ever could as a startup. No answer needed, unsolicited advice. Anyway,
those guys are his investors. Those guys are all his investors.
Yeah.
But one of them's got to win. One of them's got to win.
I very much appreciate and understand exactly what you're saying, and it's not lost on me. So I appreciate it. We should go grab a drink at some point. It'll be fun.
Sure.
We have LG, we have Samsung as some of our very large investors, and I don't have any illusion about what it takes to go into mass production. They do it extremely well. They are the largest in the entire world. Those are the types of partners that you need in order to get to scale. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and those partners, there's a very obvious and very strategic reason why they invest in a company like yours. And it is very self-serving, as to Rony's point.
But one of them has to win, right? You can't
want you to succeed. They want you to succeed inside their realm. They do not want you to succeed outside of their realm.
We understand it's a question of build or buy. We understand.
Well, that is all the time we have. As I'm sure those of you listening can tell, we could go on for an awfully long time about this topic. It just depends on how deep in the weeds you want to let these guys get. In a half an hour, There's not very deep that we can go. I do have one parting shot for you, Jon. You've shown me demos that are animated, that wanted to look real, that I wanted to reach out and touch. But I think there's a different way to fool people. Invite people into that room with nothing in it except for a table, and have bottles of water on the table. And you have a bottle of water in your hand, and you hand the bottle of water to Charlie or whoever happens to walk in the room, and whether I take the bottle or not, instruct me to put it on the table, and it falls through the table. And that's when I'm like, oh my God, this isn't a real table, but it fooled me completely. That would be the demo to do, rather than the creator of light, as much fun as he was. This would be a really dramatic way to blow people's mind, because it does appear to be real it appears to be a physical object.
And I know we're running way over time, but the funniest thing is that is one of the ideas that we've been playing with, and now I've ruined it for you. Just forget that you recommended it, and then we'll in the future.
All right. Well, it's nice of you to flatter me. And
if any of our listeners are fascinated by this, find a way to go see a real static hologram somewhere, in a museum, an
I was just Googling it. There actually are a couple of galleries in New York that display holographic art that is more like what you were talking about from the 70s and the 80s.
It is a remarkable experience.
The museum closed in 1992, it turns out.
It's a shame they closed it, because they had hundreds and hundreds of holograms. It was fantastic. But if you're interested in this space, go see a real hologram, and then hope that Jon can pull off this magic over the next X amount of years. We're keeping our fingers crossed, Jon.
Jon, come back, Jon. It was great talking to you. Gentlemen, have a great weekend. Have a great weekend, everybody at home, and we'll see you next Friday.
Cheers. See you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.